Darkness at the baptism. A day of celebration turns into a scene of chaos. The sun had barely risen over Port Charles when the final touches were placed inside the old stone chapel, which stood proudly on the hill like a monument to tradition. Fresh flowers adorned every corner of the sanctuary, their gentle fragrance mixing with the soft aroma of candle wax. For Sasha, this day marked a turning point, a moment of healing, of renewal. Today was Daisy's baptism. It was meant to be a sacred celebration of new life, unity and peace. But as with most things in this town, the illusion of calm was always one breath away from collapse. Sasha arrived at the church early, cradling her infant daughter in her arms with a reverence that belied the quiet panic just beneath her composed exterior. Dressed in a simple white gown trimmed with lace, Daisy was the picture of innocence, unaware of the legacy and burden she had inherited. This baptism wasn't just a spiritual ritual, it was Sasha's silent promise to protect her daughter from the violence and secrets that had plagued their family. And it was also an opportunity for Sonny, her father-in-law, to step back into a role he had cherished, protector, patriarch, and now, the one to bless this child into the faith. Family and friends quietly filled the pews, exchanging polite whispers and soft smiles. Carly, ever the force of composure, greeted guests with measured grace, while Michael sat rigidly, eyes darting toward every door and shadow. Even the most joyous events in their family came with an undercurrent of dread. Sonny Corinthos had enemies, always had, and none of them had ever respected the sanctity of family occasions. The church bells chimed, signaling the beginning of the ceremony. Sasha moved slowly down the aisle, holding Daisy like a prayer in motion. She approached the altar, where Sonny stood in solemn silence, his dark suit crisp, his hands steady, though his eyes betrayed a storm of emotion. This was more than ceremony. It was the start of a legacy, one he hoped would transcend his sins and violence. But as Sasha extended Daisy toward Sonny, preparing for the baptismal blessing, a sharp, blood-curdling scream sliced through the chapel's serene atmosphere. Time seemed to stop. Guests froze mid-breath, turning instinctively toward the source of the sound. Before anyone could comprehend what was happening, the church doors burst open with a deafening bang, and chaos bled into the sanctity of the altar. A group of masked individuals in black tactical clothing stormed the aisle. They moved with surgical precision, no wasted movement, no hesitation. Automatic rifles were slung across their chests, and they spread like ink through the chapel, shattering the illusion of safety. Gasps echoed against stone walls, screams fractured the stillness, and the scent of incense was quickly replaced with the pungent threat of gunmetal. Two of them moved directly toward Sonny, who instinctively positioned himself in front of Sasha and Daisy. But this was not a robbery. It was a targeted operation. One of the masked intruders pulled out a document, an arrest warrant, stamped and official. The voice behind the mask was cold, mechanical, but unmistakably authoritative. Sonny Corinthos, you are under arrest for conspiracy to traffic weapons across international borders. The words hit the congregation like a thunderclap. Carly rushed forward, only to be held back at gunpoint. Michael rose from his pew, fists clenched, but knew better than to make a move. Sasha shielded Daisy against her chest, trembling as Sonny looked back at her with an expression torn between fury and apology. Sonny didn't resist. He raised his hand slowly, his jaw tight, and nodded once in silent acknowledgement. It wasn't the first time he had been taken away in cuffs, but never like this, not in front of his granddaughter, not on this day, and never with such theatrical cruelty. He didn't even make eye contact with the guests as he was dragged down the center aisle of the church, flanked by men with weapons, the quiet weight of judgment falling on every step he took. The ceremony halted, abandoned mid-prayer. The priest stood dumbfounded near the altar, still holding the ceremonial oil in one shaking hand. Sasha clutched Daisy tightly, her breath caught somewhere between grief and shock. The guests didn't know whether to stay or flee. Some ushered their children out, others whispered furiously among themselves, their faces pale with fear and disbelief. Outside, the sound of helicopters thudding overhead became louder, closer. News vans were already arriving. Someone had tipped off the press. Sonny's arrest wasn't just an operation, it was a spectacle. The narrative was clear: take down the king in the heart of his kingdom, in front of his family, at a sacred moment meant for peace. It was psychological warfare. And it worked. In the hours that followed, the church would remain locked, cordoned off as part of a federal investigation. Reporters circled like vultures outside the iron gates, shouting questions no one dared answer. Daisy's baptism gown was stained with Sasha's tears, and the oil meant for blessing remained unopened. For Sasha, the moment had been stolen. A day that was supposed to represent spiritual cleansing now felt tainted by public humiliation and grief. And yet, as she sat quietly in the front pew, still holding Daisy close, her resolve hardened. This wouldn't be the end of Daisy's story. It wouldn't even be the end of Sonny's. But it was, without question, the end of innocence. Port Charles would not forget what happened in that chapel. Lines had been crossed. Traditions had been shattered. And beneath the silence that settled once the sirens faded, one truth remained: whoever had orchestrated this public takedown didn't just want Sonny behind bars. They wanted to destroy everything he stood for: his family, his reputation, and the future he was trying to preserve. In the days to come, the Corinthos family would be forced to confront not only the fallout of Sonny's arrest but the deeper conspiracy threatening to unravel everything they had built. Loyalties would be tested, enemies would resurface, and secrets would begin to leak like blood from an old wound. But in that moment, in the hush that followed the violence, Sasha rocked her daughter gently, whispering a vow that only Daisy could hear. She would finish what was started. Not just the baptism, but the fight to protect their legacy. Even if it meant going to war.